call the roll, please?
Hanson. Here. Skinner. Edith.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Rohr.
Here.
Hosty. Boynton.
Here.
Weinhold. Crawley.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Keeney.
Here.
Beckwith.
Here.
McMahon. Murray.
Here.
Warndorf.
Here.
Garrett.
Here.
Hall. Here. Kasak.
Here.
Salvo.
Here.
Fonzie.
Here.
Chutney. Turner. Walker.
Here.
Bateman.
Here.
Ostek.
Here.
Babcock.
Here.
Brown. Ford.
Here.
Randall.
Here.
Balcom.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Chesbro.
Here.
Church.
Here.
Buck. Haber. Russell.
I will not at this time call for an invocation and pledge of allegiance led by Legislator Treasurer.
It says in the Bible, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Lord, many issues upon us today. Help us to focus where there is work to be done. Grant us the strength and the passion to be there for the truth. Open our ears and our hearts to those truly in need. Strengthen our resolve in fighting the devil's distractions. And most of all, thank you, Lord, for Jesus, who lived and died that we might lay our burdens at your feet and pursue a fuller life, a life of your love. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting? Legislator Taylor would like to make an addition to this.
On page 15, in the first paragraph, we had discussion between Rhino and Fitzpatrick, but there was quite a bit of discussion afterwards. I know I introduced some questions. None of that reflected on that. I would like that added, please.
Legislator Brown.
On page 16, it says legislator Brown indicated that Mr. Spencer indicated they were looking for funding outsourced, but were unable to get it. I indicated that he was looking for funding with HUD and FMHA, and I believe it was legislator Crowley that indicated that they have been unable to receive it.
You want that added to the minutes?
Yes.
Are there any other corrections or additions?
Yes, I have one. 2 months ago, I made an announcement regarding the special committee. In that announcement, I mentioned that legislator Haber was in fact complaining. Following me, and to correct the minutes, legislator Turner mentioned that I had also mentioned legislator McMahon as complaining. That was not the case. I checked my records just to make this record clarified. Legislator Haber was complaining. I agree.
Thank you, Legislator Johnson. Are there any other corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, someone move to accept the minutes with the additions and corrections. Legislator Beckwith moved and Walker seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Could you have the clerk's 17 copy and Mr. Alamo correction?
Do that. At this time, I would like to offer the floor for introductions of visitors, members of the public who wish to speak at this time. Legislator Buck.
Chair, I'd like to introduce the Councilwoman Smart, Charlotte, down the valley. On behalf of Legislator Hosty, who's not here, one of his constituents in the audience, did he get?
Are there any other people who would like to introduce visitors at this time? Legislator Bauer.
This time I'd like to introduce Mrs. Mary Lakeside, Mark's wife.
Any other introductions? If not, we will
Just a
move.
minute.
Hold on.
I'd like to introduce a senator from Albany here, Senator James Wright.
Believe it or not, I was going to introduce him.
I beat you to it.
I know. Okay, so. This time I'd like to call on one, Bill Russell.
I'd like to
Legislator Russell.
welcome our sheriff back to work after his time in the hospital, traveling out.
Did you say this is when you wanted the public to speak if they had any comments?
Not yet, I still have to go through some things here.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, I'd like to call on Ellen Chetney, Legislator Health. Chetney, who will introduce Steve Bolton.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call on Steve Bolton, the Director of Harbor Festivals Incorporated, who has some news for us about Harbor.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Chairman Church, for this quick moment to, and I will make some very, very brief remarks. In Harborfest, would very much like to thank the county legislators for their support in doing the planning for Harborfest '94, and you should have at your desk, we'd like to present to you each an honorary program and also a brochure from Harborfest '94. And I would like to take just a quick second or two to thank a few. You get in very difficult ground when you start picking out people to thank, but there are some people among you who do deserve some special recognition. And I did hear from Chairman Church, someone mentioning that we're glad to see the sheriff back. The sheriff was very institutional this year in helping us with, instrumental rather, in helping us in our early security planning, and I also join in welcoming the sheriff back to his position. Mr. Jack Tierney, of course, is always a strength. Jack is a person that I can call on the phone and say, Jack, I've got a problem, and by golly, Jack's always got a fix for it, and he's a friend. You know, a friend in need is a friend indeed, and Jack certainly is that. Early on this year, we were faced with planning difficulty in obtaining our health permit. Harborfest, as you know, has grown dramatically over the years, peaking over 300,000 last year with a peak attendance of about 110,000 in the city on Saturday evening and night of fireworks. We worked very closely with the health department this year. We've got some very new requirements. We will have for the first time a medevac helicopter in the city of Oswego. We'll have advanced life support ambulances in the county. And I would very much like to thank the commissioner and his staff in helping Harborfest with their planning. I'd like to bring up, or just give an example of one dramatic change we have this year. We were deluged last year with vehicles, with people in the city. And we've gotten together with central planners this year, and we have devised a very extensive park and ride, which I'd like to just describe for a quick moment. As we're really targeting, this park and ride really targets the Syracuse audience. We have about 32% of our attendees come from Onondaga County. As one proceeds north this year on either 481 or 48, you will be stopped at Utica Street. I mean, there will be, the road will basically end there, and everybody will be, the Harborfest visitors will be turned west on Utica, where they'll go into the college, back into Romney. We're anticipating putting between 5,000 and 7,000 vehicles out in Romney this year, where they'll be mass moved by Centro in a shuttle, very similar to what they do at the Dome. So this should keep, we anticipate will keep over the 4 days of the festival, we'll keep over 20,000 vehicles out of the city center. And we hope that this will be a tremendous reduction in the traffic pattern. I think lastly, I'd like to thank Kathy Captain Popeness in the tourism people. You've been very instrumental with us, helping us in the budget aspects and getting our things through. So, Harbor Fest views the county legislators in a partnership relation. I want to thank you all for your support in the past, and we look forward to working with you in the years to come. Thank you, Chairman Church.
I would like to call on Legislator Boynton, who will ask members of the Public Safety Committee and the Sheriff to join him for an employee recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, members of the Public Safety Committee, please come forward. Okay. I would like to make a few remarks first about the honoree today, Investigator H.L. Fox Jr., who has worked for me ever since I have been sheriff. He was appointed sheriff on July 1st, 1969. He was promoted to investigator in 1978. And I just, Carla, would you come on up and Undersheriff Todd, is he in here? Come on up, Carl. Oh, yeah, there he is. I said, because he was so small. For you that don't know, Harlan is our juvenile investigator. He handles most of our juvenile crimes. And not only does he handle the crimes, he also makes speeches to the juveniles. He tries to instill in them to do the right thing so that we don't have to deal with them later on. In addition to that, since I have been sheriff, I have awarded him 4 letters of commendation, and just to make it quick, I gave him one on 2/20/86 for an incident that happened in the town of Hastings where a despondent subject was attempting to take his own life. He was armed with a shotgun. Investigator Fox was able to convince him to give himself up, and he was taken into custody without incident. He also was issued one on 4/12/88 concerning 2 runaways, aged 14 and 15, and a boyfriend of one of the subjects became violent and started swinging a galvanized pipe at Investigator Fox, threatening to kill him. He was breaking windows. He talked that subject out of continuing his actions, and he was taken him into custody without any injury. He also was issued a letter of commendation on 5/16/89 for his part in the investigation of a serious case here in the town of Scriba, which involved the murder of a young boy. And he was awarded a letter of commendation on 5/18/90 for his assistance in a homicide investigation in the town of Hampville. He's also, you'll see him around in your various towns, probably fingerprinting you. And he talks, he gives safety tips even to senior citizens. So anytime that Investigator Fox is asked to do a job, he's always done it, and he's done it well. And it's my pleasure to be here today to present him this 25-year certificate.
Thank you.
At this time, I would like to call on Legislator Frida Call, who will ask the members of the County Clerks Committee and the County Clerk to join her for the reading and presentation of a proclamation. was fixed. Got it, yeah. I never figured it
County of Oswego proclamation recognizing Shelley Partridge. Whereas Shelley Partridge is a motor vehicles clerk in the motor vehicles office of the county office building Oswego. Whereas on Thursday, July 7th, while processing an application for a driver's permit, Shelley noticed discrepancies in an applicant's social security card. And whereas on the basis of these discrepancies, Shelley suspected that the applicant and his 3 companions may be illegal immigrants to the United States. And whereas Shelley immediately contacted the Social Security Administration and was directed to other federal agencies requiring several time-consuming telephone calls. And whereas while waiting for the arrival of a border patrol agent, Shelley and other motor vehicles employees delayed the applicant and his companions by pretending that the office computer and camera were not functioning properly. And whereas Shelley demonstrated initiative and courage above and beyond that expected of the motor vehicle staff, and her actions resulted in the deportation of 4 illegal immigrants. Now therefore I, Frank R. Church, Chairman of the Oswego County Legislature, on behalf of the entire legislature, do hereby commend Shelley Partridge for her dedication and outstanding service to the residents of Oswego County. In witness whereof, I have herein to set my hand officially and cause to be affixed the seal of the County of Oswego at Oswego, New York, on this the 14th day of July, 1994. Frank R. Church, Chairman of the Oswego County Legislature.
If I may, I'd like to just add a few words. First of all, I'd like to present Jeannie Regan, who is in the back there. She is the supervisor of the motor vehicle here in Oswego. And of course, everybody, I believe, knows Colleen Bacon, who's the top head honcho in motor vehicles in Oswego County. She does a fine, fine job, and as all of the staff. But I would just like to bring to your attention sometimes that we're beat on a little bit because of the amount of documentation that we ask for when somebody is applying for a driver's license or a permit or a duplicate driver's license and everything. Even though the motor vehicle technology has improved tremendously over the last few years, we still don't have it. For example, on the duplicate license, we still don't have this technology where we can bring up the person and retrieve their picture, retrieve their signature from their file. Soon we will have that technology, but until then we have to ask the question. All of the staff is trained to look for these things. We just don't always have this type of thing happen, but sometimes we have to say no. Customers are not happy, but sometimes it's for their own good. For example, if we and Shelley had allowed this to happen, these people would have walked out with a non-driver photo ID, and one would have walked out with a driver's permit, and it would have opened up the whole world to them, because as you know, everything is based now on your driver's license because New York State has a photo license. So again, it was the initiative of this girl, the courage of this woman to ask the right questions, spot the phony identification, and do the right thing. So again, I appreciate it, and I think all the constituents, which are my constituents and all of your constituents, should feel the same way and should be look favorable on this type of employee. Thank you.
It's my pleasure at this time to introduce a lady who I had the privilege of working a little bit with Her name is Fran Koenigsberg, and she is a coordinator for the Success by Six program, which when she explains it to you, I'm sure you will feel as I do that this is a very well worthwhile program. Welcome for today, young lady.
Thank you very much, Chairman Church. I've come to ask Mr. Church if I can speak to you because Success by Six is one of the newer efforts in Oswego County that I think maybe it's time we all talk a little bit more about. Success by Six is an initiative of the United Way of Oswego County to ensure that all children are ready to learn when they enter school. It is part of the National Mobilization for Children of America of the United Way of America. Both efforts recognize the need to have children become well educated so we as a nation can have an educated workforce. That's bottom line. Oswego County has been involved from the very beginning. Mr. Eisman served on a policy committee. Mr. Church has now taken his place. Many of your department heads serve on committees. The in-kind contribution of county departments has been amazing. I am not here to ask for money. Let me give you a little background. Teachers tell us that about 50% of all children are not ready to learn when they get to school. For some, it is physical developmental problems, perhaps due to low birth weight, poor nutrition, and shocks. For others, the reason appears to be social development, poor skills when she or he interacts with others, lack of language development, inability to listen and follow directions. For still others, it may be emotional problems, shyness caused by social isolation, or immaturity perhaps because expectations were not clearly stated. And lastly, what we call behavioral problems. Children who have real trouble understanding appropriate behaviors to solve their own problems, hitting instead of talking. No one is saying who is to blame this situation. There appear to be many, many reasons. Mr. Church and I have discussed them, and one of them we think is families seldom eat meals together anymore. But we have families changing family patterns. We have situations where both parents need to work and not having enough energy or time for effective parenting. We have TV. We have lots and lots of reasons for these problems. The Success by Six initiative says that if we as a whole community will make a commitment to our youngest children, perhaps we can solve part of this problem. We have completed a long-range plan, and at the present moment we are focusing on several areas. But the way we're going to do this is what I think is such fun. We're finding new ways with the private sector, meaning business and industry, the public sector, meaning you guys, and the nonprofits, meaning United Way agencies and other human service agencies, can work together. We do not need in Oswego County any more agencies, thank you. I can't find the need for another. And I'm an agency person. We may need new ways of delivering programs. We certainly need new ways of delivering information. We will be at Harbor Fest just to give out information. Thanks to Cooperative Extension, we were in the county building at the county fair to give out information. Another thing we all need to do is to become advocates for children and families. We need to be sure there are licensed, affordable daycare centers or daycare available to those who need and want it. We're doing some things here, we need to do a lot more. I'm not going to quote statistics, they change daily, and some of them are frightening. And we need to find ways to help parents improve their parenting skills. The kids they are raising will live their lives in the 21st century. Our current initiative We'll start out by working on 3 areas: nutrition and mental health. And this is a very exciting new kind of thing. We're working in partnership with Cooperative Extension, and Mr. Brower has submitted a grant to the United States Agricultural Department where we hope to have a nutrition educator in every town of Oswego County beginning next year. If that grant comes home, it's going to be very, very exciting. People sometimes don't need just paper, they need someone to kind of talk to them. That's where you guys come in a minute. We are also working on early childhood education. This is a parent-centered effort. After all, we say parents are teachers, the child's first teacher. We want to help parents find ways that they can help with their kids with language development, for example. And lastly, we're working on building family stability, an effort to coordinate everything that is being done to help families be effective and supportive working units. If you'd like a copy of our long-range plan, please call the United Way office in Oswego. I did not have enough copies. Why am I here? I'm here because this is a project that is really trying to involve the whole community. As we move out to other parts of the county, I or someone who works with me will need your input. We need to know who can we call on to help us. Where can we hold meetings? Is it the community building in Granby or is it the fire hall? I don't know. Somebody needs to tell me. And there are all kinds of ors and ors and ors, and I can go on with the list. We hope to continue our very close working relationships with county departments who provide human services and help. The contribution of time by these people has been of absolutely incredible value. But most important, I must emphasize, we have made the decision in our policy council, which is made up of representatives of government, business and industry, and education, that this is a county-wide effort. Although we started in the city of Oswego because the city school district funded us, we will now expand to the entire county. We are being watched as one of only 6 counties that has a success by 6 project in a county that is primarily a rural area. The United Way of America is always on my tail. What are you doing now that's different? And I have to say, we're surviving and we're doing this and we're doing, go to the county fair. You went to the county fair? People never thought that. Interesting. Please look over our directory. And when we get a chance, and when we visit with you, if we have forgotten something or overlooked something, please feel free to tell us. I didn't know, for example, there was a group in Williamstown called Moms. It's a group of mothers that have gotten together to provide recreation for their kids. Neat. I found about it when I was doing my marketing in Mapleview, where I live in the summer. Thank you for your time. I hope to maybe in a year to come back and tell you that we have gotten a lot done. I know you will hear from us. We're really on a roll. Thank you.
It's my pleasure at this time to introduce the Honorable Senator James Wright, who was our representative in the 46th Senatorial District. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Usually when I was in this room, I was seated over there where Arthur is, as opposed to up here, so it's a pleasure to change hats. What I wanted to do was, in my conversations with Frank and Jack Tierney and Art, I just wanted to take the opportunity on behalf of myself as well as Fran Sullivan to update the legislature in terms of the progress that we're making in terms of low-level radioactive waste siting, some of the concerns that we have with regard to that issue, and then in turn respond to any questions that you may have as your representatives. As I'm sure you're all well aware by now, The proposal that the governor advanced, and the first time that we saw that publicly advanced was June 15th in Buffalo. The governor threw out the suggestion that the Power Authority state-owned facilities should be the repositories, albeit temporary by his definition, should be the repositories to solve the state's low-level radioactive waste problem. Needless to say, we've had a state siting commission that has now spent in excess of 8 years trying to solve that problem, and at the 11th hour, the governor advances the idea that we should move it to Fitzpatrick. Not the first time that that idea had been advanced. It came up again late at the 1993 legislative session. Never really got off the ground, and certainly at this point has not gotten off the ground in terms of this current legislative session. So needless to say, from June 15th to the end of session when we were adjourned, a great deal of my time, a great deal of Assemblywoman Sullivan's time was spent working with our colleagues, working with our leadership to ensure, from our perspective, that any legislation that was advanced would look out for the interests of the people of Oswego County and would specifically deal with protecting our interests as it relates to the siting of the Fitzpatrick plant. Toward that aim, we've shared communications with Governor Cuomo very specifically, as well as the Power Authority Chairman and their new CEO, Chief Executive Officer, direct communications to the Power Authority trustees, as well as communications with the Great Lakes Commission and our own leadership, specifically in my case, Majority Leader Senator Ralph Marino. And in all those instances, we advanced what we believe are a series of critical issues that affect any kind of siting in terms of low-level radioactive waste, but more importantly are very specific and germane to any kind of siting that would occur in Oswego County and Fitzpatrick specifically. And if I might, I'm going to take just a few minutes to outline some of those issues. Now, I would also share with you that all of the correspondence that we have initiated, we have filed with the Chairman's office so that it is available, and throughout this process have been in direct contact with your Chairman, with the administrative staff, and in fact, the information that we first requested from them was extremely valuable, the information the county prepared back in 1989 when the New Haven, Scriba areas were identified as potential locations under the Siting Commission's review process. And all of that material developed by the county in cooperation with its Citizens Advisory Council, we solicited and received from the county and used that in our discussions in Albany throughout this debate. Critical to our argument is the whole issue of siting at an operating reactor and where the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, comes into play on that particular issue. We had communications with the NRC as well as with other nuclear operators in terms of securing information that we believe legitimatizes our contention that there should be no siting at an operating nuclear reactor. Thank you. The first piece that we would cite is a 1985 directive from the NRC to all of its operating licensees. And it states, quote, as a matter of policy, the NRC is opposed to any activity at a nuclear reactor site which is not generally supportive of activities authorized by the operating license and which may divert the attention of the licensee management from its primary task of safe operation of the power reactor. And that's our principal contention, that the primary responsibility of the state of New York and the primary responsibility of the New York Power Authority is the safe operation of the nuclear reactor, period. And to substantiate that, we believe that that's what the NRC has articulated as its policy in 1985 and has not to date rescinded it. We further believe that's well documented by all of the activities that the Federal Emergency Management Agency has required in terms of its off-site planning activities. We further believe it's substantiated by the fact that Oswego has served as the host community to 3 operating reactors, has assumed the burdens for this state in terms of nuclear power generation, and this state benefits considerably from the economic impact of those 3 facilities. Consistently, the Power Authority utilizes electricity generated at the Fitzpatrick plant for economic development packages throughout the state to save jobs and create jobs in New York State. So clearly, Oswego County has done its share in terms of serving as host to those 3 facilities, and has certainly made the investment in terms of its off-site emergency planning activities. Furthermore, the Power Authority itself recognizes that within its nuclear division, it needs to continue its efforts to improve and enhance its management capabilities, and certainly trying to divert those activities away from the safe operation of nuclear reactors into low-level waste operations is contrary to the direction in any 11th hour attempt by the governor or the Power Authority to advance that idea. Again, I believe, and I think others would concur, dispute the NRC's policy. Secondly, the NRC indicates, and again I'm quoting from the same policy document, in order for the NRC to consider any proposal for commercial storage at a reactor site, including commercial storage and existing low-level waste storage facilities, the NRC must be convinced that no significant environmental impact will result. And in fact, given the adjacency to Lake Ontario, and given the wetlands, given the floodplain, given the geology, as well as the severe weather conditions, all of those work to the detriment of any kind of siting at the operating facility at Fitzpatrick. In fact, all of those criteria are exact opposites of the kind of criteria that one looks for in siting a nuclear reactor. Primary consideration in siting a nuclear reactor is abundance of water. That's why you have plants located here at Lake Ontario. That's why you have the Gannett plant in Wayne County located adjacent to Lake Ontario, because of that abundance of water. The truth, and in fact, you want just the opposite for a low-level radioactive waste site. So that the prime criteria for citing each of those facilities are in direct contradiction to one another. I won't belabor it. You can certainly review that material as it is available. But as recently as April of 1994, just several months ago, the NRC reaffirmed its position in the Federal Register and states, I quote, "The Commission continues to favor disposal of low-level waste over storage, and emphasizes, the Commission expects low-level waste disposal facilities to be sited and developed in a timely manner. The Commission also expects that the major interested parties, including waste generators and states, to continue to take all reasonable steps to ensure that low-level waste disposal capacity is available soon." So in terms of restating its position, the NRC is very firm in terms of they are supporting a long-term solution, and that solution is disposal as opposed to storage. In turn, they are reaffirming the commitment to the federal policy. And so I'd like to just articulate 4 points that I think sum up the concerns that we are articulating and advancing on behalf of this community. 1, power reactor licensees issued by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission generally do not authorize the storage of waste not generated by the utility. Significant licensing issues would need to be resolved prior to NRC approval of such storage. 2, the storage of waste generated from throughout a state at a utility site would undermine the objective of the Federal Low-Level Radioactive Waste Policy Act for states and compacts to establish permanent disposal capacity for low-level waste generated within their borders. 3, required on-site storage of waste not generated by the utility is an unnecessary diversion of management attention from the primary business of operating the reactor. This is especially the case for storage of new and different types of waste, i.e. hospital medical waste, with which the utility has no experience. And 4, there is no reason to believe that the storage of non-utility and utility waste at a reactor site is more likely to meet with public approval than disposal at sites that are specifically selected and designated for that purpose. And I think that's the critical factor when you put everything together. Why? Simply because you have an operating nuclear reactor, and why? Simply because it's owned by the state of New York and one of its authorities, that all of a sudden becomes a site acceptable to the public, to the citizens to their local governments over any other site, particularly voluntary sites elsewhere in the state. And I think that's a fallacy with the proposal. I think the solution ultimately lies in pursuing a program within New York State that provides significant community benefits to a volunteer community that moves ahead. And I would cite as that an example, this is not unique to the state of New York. These dilemmas are going on throughout the nation. Michigan has been closed from out-of-state transport for 3.5 years. Yet Michigan survives, its hospitals are open, its industries continue to produce. In turn, California is going through a like dilemma in terms of trying to site, and interestingly enough, in California, it's known as Ward Valley, not West Valley as in New York State, but Ward Valley. And just as the opponents to West Valley in this state suggested nuclear reactors, the same solution has been advanced before in California. And let me share with you the reaction from the governor of California to that proposal. And this is in response to a correspondence from a local congressman in California. Quoting Governor Wilson, this is May of 1994. I agree with you, this proposal is ill-conceived and join with you in rejecting it as a useful or viable alternative. And the governor proceeds to very specifically articulate his reasons and then continues. The proposal to store waste at the Rancho Seco, which is a decommissioned nuclear reactor, is not viable. It is in fact an attempt by the opponents of long-term safety to divert attention to other schemes which have no chance of working. We must reject this cynical disregard for real public safety and pursue with the utmost vigor the one realistic and scientifically supported alternative, a comprehensive, low-level radioactive waste disposal site at Ward Valley. I would contend that New York State is in the same dilemma. I would wish that our governor would take the same kind of definitive leadership position that the governor of California has taken. That, unfortunately, is not the case. Nonetheless, those are the rationales and the reasons. Toward that aim, both Grant and I have introduced legislation in both houses, the Senate and the Assembly, that work toward those objectives. Specifically, one is a ban on siting low-level radioactive waste facilities at an operating nuclear reactor. And the second provides for local participation, local input into the decision-making, including public referendum of the local community. So that both of those focus and target two of the key issues that we believe are appropriate. We will continue to work on those efforts. Now, the good news is we were successful in deferring any of that legislation in the waning hours of this legislative session in Albany. And in fact, there were ongoing negotiations throughout those waning hours that I participated in with the chairman of the Energy Committee and with others. And we were successful in ensuring that there was not legislation that would cite, either on a temporary or any other basis, low-level waste from outside the reactor site itself. Now, I have to tell you, immediately upon taking those positions, we were inundated with opponents in terms of citizens' coalitions for various environmental activities, including the Sierra Club, as well as the medical community in terms of hospitals throughout the state that are facing significant difficulties in terms of dealing with their problem. Their solution is the site at Fitzpatrick. I brought along, and again will provide to, as we have provided to the chairman's office, this is just samplings of the lobbying efforts that were going on in the last 2 or 3 days in Albany, trying to push what is known as the President Luster bill, President being the Senate sponsor, Luster being the Assembly sponsor. And one has to recognize all of these alternatives that are being advanced, be they President Luster, be they Goodman, Grannis, or all simply motivated by the representatives in terms of protecting their communities also. Assemblyman Grannis and Senator Goodman both represent Manhattan and the city of New York. Happens to be the location of Sloan Kettering, the major medical research facility that has a significant waste problem, and they'd like to ship it to Fitzpatrick. The same holds true in terms of Senator President, who represents West Valley, Assemblyman Luster, who represents the Ithaca area, Cornell Medical Center, etc. Those proposals are not truly proposals to provide a statewide solution, but they in fact are local solutions cloaked as statewide proposals to protect their own interests. And I think we have to be very candid about that. Nonetheless, they do have a life of their own. No sooner did the legislative session adjourn, and the Senate in particular was criticized for not solving the low-level radioactive waste problem and for opposing the Fitzpatrick site. Well, I'm very glad the Senate was criticized for that, because from my perspective, that means that we were successful in advancing our arguments and convincing the leadership in the Senate to say no to the governor's plan and to say no to the Assembly's proposal in terms of Assemblyman Luster's activity. So from that standpoint, Fran and I are both very pleased that we were able to prevail not only on our leadership but also upon our colleagues in terms of deferring this. What is equally important, and I think needs to be reinforced to everyone today, this fight is long from over. We have been involved in siting for over 8 years in the state, and the State Siting Commission has been unsuccessful in doing that. I happen to believe that ultimately the solution will be found in a realistic community benefits package and finding and working with a volunteer community. At this point, neither of those exist. There is a volunteer community, Ashford in West Valley. In turn, there is not a comprehensive benefit package. If in fact a comprehensive benefit package is advanced, including infrastructure, economic development, as well as local assistance, I think you then can be very effective in attracting voluntary sites throughout the state. It has worked in other areas in this nation. So I think that's the direction New York State should take after 8 years. Those are the kind of initiatives that we're pursuing. We're very appreciative of the citizen support that we've received. We've talked with a number of local residents who have given us advice and assistance, and we also appreciate the support and commitment of the county as we've worked through that. With that, again, it's my pleasure to be here. I will, Mr. Chairman, it's your pleasure. I'll be glad to respond to any questions that anyone might have. Otherwise, say thank you very much. Legislator Taylor, how are you, Charlotte?
I understand, I went to a conference at my class and I spoke to Mr. Williams from the Siting Commission. At that point, Mr. Don Winship was there. Mr. Williams said that the problem they were having in the Siting Commission is that the state legislature had taken away the right to make decisions on siting, and the only way that they could go back into it was to have the state legislature reinstate the Siting Commission. Are you aware of what he's talking about?
Well, the Siting Commission is still in effect. The Siting Commission still has the responsibility to ascertain, recommend, and develop sites. Okay, in terms of West Valley has significant legislative opposition, and it's principally supported by those various opponents who are advancing Fitzpatrick, and that's the loggerhead that we have in terms of the siting issue. What is occurring is that while the town of Ashford itself has indicated its willingness to accept and serve as a low-level waste site, and is further interested in negotiating that, all of the surrounding communities have voiced their opposition and have compelled their local and state elected officials to oppose siting at Ashford. So as a result, while there was legislation specifically introduced, and in fact it was that legislation, it was introduced in the Rules Committee at the end of the 1992 session, prior to my being in Albany. But in 1992, there was legislation actually prepared in the Rules Committee of both houses, the Assembly and the Senate, that would have cited at West Valley. In turn, would have provided the outline of the community benefit package to the town of Ashford, to the county of Cattaraugus, where Mr. Winship is the chairman. That unfortunately never left committee because there was absence of sufficient legislative support to pass that bill. And as a result, that has continued to languish there for the last 2 years, looking for the Siting Commission to come up with other alternatives or for the governor to take further leads. governor, in fact, was working with the lieutenant governor to advance West Valley at one time. Not to sound cynical, but it tends to coincide with the election cycles that these things change.
It was just, he was so blunt about, he couldn't, his hands were tied until the legislature came back and reinstated the planning commission.
Yes, that's because of and that was done, I believe, several years ago, because of frustration with the inactivity of the siting commission. I mean, there is a fair amount of support in the legislature to do away with the siting commission. In fact, that was one of the issues that we were negotiating in the late hours. Because of the difficulties in Cortland, Allegheny, West Valley, clearly the siting commission has a rather significant problem in terms of credibility. And so there is more than considerable support that the siting commission be eliminated, that the technical scientific component of the commission be retained, and then we move ahead on citing issues with a voluntary component, which was never clearly explored by the citing commission.
Do you know where any of this is going, how the medical waste or whatever?
It's all being stored on site at this particular point,
Any other questions?
which is what's occurring in Michigan and other states.
Jeff, well, I was at the same meeting surely as that, and the siting commission, he said that they were not allowed to talk, they could talk to anybody but West Valley.
That was the governor's directive.
Okay.
Ultimately, what they were trying to do was site a facility at West Valley.
Okay.
And that was the preferred plan of action at that particular point in time. When it became evident that there was an absence of support in western New York, that's when, coincidentally, as the governor of Buffalo, when he makes this announcement, happens to be western New York, that's when he threw out this package. Legislator Brown.
Hi, the Buffalo newspaper was very happy to run an editorial saying that the waste was going to go to Oswego County or West Valley, and that they didn't want it in their state. It was a Buffalo Assembly person and two from Long Island that were sponsoring the bill, so that's that. And the governor came out in news of Binghamton and said, well, it should be either Fitzpatrick or Indian Point, but Indian Point had two dense population. Well, if this is not detrimental to the public health, what difference does population make?
Well, you'll have to pose that question to the governor, because he's the one that said that Indian Point would be ruled out because of the density of population. And he attributes that, quite candidly, to transportation issues and a number of factors. And while population certainly would be a factor in terms of any kind of siting, I don't think, and I personally don't believe it's the definitive factor. There are much more critical considerations than simply the density of population, and the mere fact that most of it being generated is located in the densely populated areas of the state. That's where the large research medical facilities tend to be. I think those two are inconsistent, so they argue against one another.
Well, this was the governor's statement, and I think the people of Oswego County are worth just as much as the people of Indian Point.
I happen to believe that too, and that's what we've suggested to the governor.
Anyone?
And the representatives of Indian Point who are sponsoring the legislation in the Senate, Senator Holland and Senator Stanton. Legislator Van Schack.
I was at the same meeting in Shirley, Arthur talking about, and I really felt for the government official from Ashland who had gone through all kinds of abuse with the other members that had supported taking the material in terms of a trade-off of having all kinds of economic development in the area. He went through all this, and then he had the rug pulled out in Albany. My question, I guess, directly I'd like to ask you is that when he left that meeting, after hearing the siting group, and either Shirley or anybody else that was there, and Art and Frank were there, but I had the feeling that when he left there and the siting still looking for a place, he said, I'm going to go back and look at the figures again in terms of what they would demand, in terms of some kind of settlement. Now, is that site still a viable site, Jim, in your assessment of this?
Yes, and it's still considered a viable site in terms of a number of legislative initiatives. Obviously, it has local opposition, but in terms of moving ahead on it, one of the proposals that was being negotiated at the end was to pursue further study at West Valley, coupled with temporary medical storage at West Valley. Again, we were unsuccessful in terms of getting agreement with the other progress on that particular initiative. So by the very essence of the proposals that were being negotiated, that in fact speaks to it as a viable site. And I think it remains that. I also think, from my own personal perspective, having read and been through in detail the community benefits package, I think it's inadequate. I think there should be a greater community benefits package. Had that been done initially, I think you would have seen greater receptivity to the idea of siting. What's your favor?
Is the governor on to do anything to take this, or would it be?
I've not heard of any.
If they take it in the other counties, it would be off the benefit package, but if it goes on state facility land, in other words, all yours, here you are.
Well, he never formally, in fairness to the governor, he never advanced a specific proposal that outlined what he would or wouldn't do. He threw the suggestion out. That suggestion then became the subject of considerable debate publicly, as well as considerable debate within both houses of the legislature. The executive branch never advanced a specific written proposal that would have incorporated or included any benefit package or specifically included Fitzpatrick.
Do you anticipate that if we end up with it, we won't have any money attached to it?
Well, clearly, from my perspective, my effort is to ensure that we don't end up with it. And if one starts negotiating, then you compromise your ability to say you don't want it. So unless this legislature tells me to the contrary, my position would remain that we would be opposed to it and not even attempt to negotiate any benefit.
If we did end up with it, if Fitzpatrick, would this create any jobs for the local cannabis?
I don't know the details, but my assumption is certainly any type of facility of this size would provide significant construction, so that would be job creation, as well as there would be significant employment in terms of managing and operating the facility itself. So certainly there would be jobs that are generated from that. As well as the proposal at West Valley provided for full taxation of the site too.
How do you feel about the site? Do you support the site?
No, I don't happen to. I think the siting commission has outlived its usefulness. I think the credibility of the siting commission has been compromised. I think after 8 years, there's a clear record of failure, and it's time to move on in a new direction.
Marshall Ann, since he's Legislator Walker, and I'm just checking Shirley, I think, again, my recollection was that the gentleman from Ashland said that he had been in the process of negotiating at that time a $300 million package of benefits and all kinds of things over a 10-year period of time. And he said, I'm going to go back and start all over again because he thinks he should get far more than that. So that's where, so to answer your question, it's $300 million over a 10-year period. That includes roads and economic development, the whole business that Jim was talking about here.
Yeah, in terms of what they offered, they offered the construction of egress and access to lanes, payments to schools, hospitals, local governments, etc. Those were minimal payments. Substantial money that was generated out of the deal is off the disposal fees, in effect, or tip fee, if you will. Whatever you pay to dispose of the waste, 6% of that would go to the local government. And in turn, anything over a certain threshold, and I forget what it was, like 150,000 tons annually, anything over that threshold, then the payment changed and increased to the local government. And that's where the bulk of the money was generated out of those fees, as opposed to direct money being invested. I think there are modifications that can be made to that could successfully attract other communities beside West Valley, or in fact close the deal with West Valley. And it's a significant enough problem for the state of New York that I think it warrants a significant investment in the state of New York.
Any other questions? I don't have a specific question, but I just want to thank Senator Wright and Jim for all his time and effort and professional work on behalf of the Seward County.
And I would amend that to include Assemblyman Sullivan also.
That also,
Okay.
but I really appreciate all you put into this, and I know we'll be getting more time.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you.
County legislature, like all groups, gets used to doing things in the same way. It's comfortable to have traditions that you're used to. However, sometimes it becomes necessary to make some basic changes. One of the changes that many people feel the legislature needs is the taping and broadcast of your meetings. When Valley first started having our meetings on the air over 2 years ago, many people felt it was going to be the end of everything good and wonderful, and that it would probably only cause problems. In fact, it has been just the opposite. Sure, the first few months are intense, and the public looks at what you're doing and wants justification for changes. But if you explain why you are doing things the way you are, and you are willing to make changes when the public is right, and there is a better way, then you develop a greater trust with more informed electorate, and you are more responsive to their needs. That is why I have organized the taping of your meetings until you decide to pay for the service yourselves as a legislature. I have approached several of the legislators, and they have believed enough in these ideas that they are willing to give it the most sincerest form of endorsement, cash. I am looking for 12 people to give $10 each per month to help the people of Oswego County be better informed. So far, I have 8 legislators: Bill Buck, Dan Shelfo, Shirley Tabor, Barbara Brown, Jim McMahon, Don Warndorf, Clay Brewer, and Don Keeney. If any of the rest of you would like to participate, please call me. Another issue I am very concerned about is the radioactive sludge. That too is the problem of tradition. This legislature is used to handling everything as committees, and every other committee is supposed to keep their hands off. I believe there are some topics that are crucial enough that they should be handled by the committee of the whole. Every legislator here should be part of the discussion and involved in the research on this. Seeker is unrelenting. There are specific deadlines, and if you don't register your concerns on time, then you lose by default. If you need to address the lead agency status question by July 25th, the town of Vonley urges you to fight to be lead agency. The town of Vonley would support you in this and hope that Monetta would also. If the 3 involved agencies band together, how could the DEC refuse to give you the designation? The DEC wants to rubber stamp approval and not look at the environmental concerns. We don't need rubber stamps. We need to take a hard look at the evidence and protect the health and safety of the residents of Oswego County. If you have been asking NIMO and PASME for their advice, when you want to find out about someone's true motives, follow the trail of money. It's a pretty obvious trail to NIMO and PASME on their views. The town of Vonley is having an informational meeting on radioactive sludge and low-level waste on Tuesday, July 19th at 7 o'clock at the Vonley Town Hall. Dr. Judith Johnsrud will be there to answer questions on these topics. She's on the Siting Commission for Pennsylvania and on the advisory board for the NRC. There is no money trail that leads to her. We invite all of you to come and get an unbiased point of view. Mark Lichtenstein is also going to be present to answer questions. I hope many of you can attend. This meeting is open to the public. We need to be concerned about the impact of processing radioactive sludge at Monetta, which the DEC has admitted will allow part of the radioactive waste into the Oswego River and Lake Ontario. They don't even want to consider the health impacts on the people living on Lake Ontario, and how about all the people in Oswego and Onondaga counties who get municipal water from the Metropolitan Water Board. They get their water from Lake Ontario. And what about the impacts on the environment of Bristol Hill, where even higher concentrations will be? What about all the people whose groundwater, all the way into Onondaga County, will be affected? Also, if they get away with this, it will be easier to justify making Scriba a low-level waste dump at Fitzpatrick. And I'm sure to save space, they'll allow higher concentrations in the sludge than they claim they would not allow. We all need to stick together and not be the course of least resistance for the DEC and Governor Cuomo. Thank you.
I believe Cindy Gagne wanted to speak at this time too.
This I just received in the mail at 25 cents a page. You ought to get it. It's the applications. I wish the DEC would keep up on the rules and regs. There's a question there from the town of Valentine that says, there is currently a regulation change as to compatibility requirements with the NRC. It would be premature to finalize anything until we know what the new standards will be. Compatibility requirements could result in a loss of local control. The DEC answers the town should be asked to clarify this point. We know of no plans by the NRC to change the standard of regulations that apply to this action. Compatibility is a requirement placed on what is called agreement state agencies as part of their agreement with the NRC. Although the U.S. NRC is developing a formal policy statement on compatibility, this will have no effect on the degree to which the town or county can regulate this radioactive material. Well, as we speak, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, all the agreement states, of which New York State is, it simply means we agree to enforce the NRC standards on radiation. They're meeting, and I understand that they're going to gut the radiation standards. And we are very lucky to have Dr. Johnsrud coming because she is the only non-nuclear employee in this meeting, and she will be here to tell us what they're doing. And I spoke to a professor from the University of Buffalo. I never knew there were Part 380 regs that were filed last October with public hearings to discuss things like radioactive sludge. And this professor told me that he commented, and he said the Part 380 regs in New York State allow for the sludge to get much hotter and to watch it because it will be a cheap vehicle and a cheap way to get rid of waste. I oppose on-site storage. I've had a lot of insults from a lot of the environmental groups in the state. I take it as a compliment. I'm very worried that on-site is going to be a cheap way to get rid of waste. And we've got to be involved in the sludge issue. We don't want them to set the precedent here. Westchester County, where the New York Power Authority owns a nuclear plant, their sludge was never dumped in Westchester County, and it's not being dumped there now with on-site. Can't the New York Power Authority respect us in the same way? Can't we ask the Power Authority to give us the same recognition and not dump the sludge here? After all, they don't do it in Westchester County, or is it because it's a too populated area? I really want you to consider taking the lead agency status and fighting the negative declaration. I've just barely been able to go through these applications. Thank you to the Town Board of Valentine. We have a chance to respond until, I believe, the 24th. But I want to tell you that I talked to Steve Ike from the DEC this week. And I told Mr. Ike that a lot of county legislators really didn't know what was going on in the issue. And he said, look, we deal with the proper chains of command. And I said, but the legislators don't know about it. He said, after we issue the permits, that means to let them continue dumping it. Then the legislators and the public can ask questions. And I said to him, but we elect the legislators and they need to know what's going on. And he said, look, we have conversations with the proper chains of command in Oswego County. Well, I would like whoever the proper chains of commands are in Oswego County to please keep all the legislators informed because we elect the legislators and they need to have these applications. Every legislator should have a copy of these applications. And if it wasn't for the Valentine Town Board, the process would have been over by now because the county filed for a 90-day extension, and due to the fact that they didn't contest lead agency or negative declaration, I understand the DEC turned down the county. The only reason there was a 30-day extension is because the Valentine Town Board brought up a lot of environmental questions, and the DEC required NIMO and NIPA to fill out full environmental impact statements. So I'd like to thank Valentine Town Board for looking out for our interests, and I hope now that you will also do this. And I'd also like to thank Terry Reynolds for being here to film the meetings.
It's very difficult to take time off from work. And I know of 3 people that would have liked to come today, but their bosses didn't think sludge was such a hot topic to address and have the day off.
At this time, I will ask if there's any presentations of petitions. Legislator McNabb.
A petition from our constitution.
I should tell you. No, but it's high, it's actually.
Diane Martell Rafferty. Just very briefly, I've been examining the sludge situation, and I've been as concerned as everyone else. But there's one point that I wonder if you are considering. If this comes to pass and we become the dumping ground, this material has to travel through your streets and your towns from all different directions. What kind of safety factors are in that will protect the public? It just really concerns me as this does drive up your streets and back roads and main highways, and I think we should consider it. Thank you.
Legislator Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a public appeal to anybody who would have evidence, either scientific or medical evidence, that low-level radioactive waste hurts the human body. I've heard a lot of negativisms about it, and I don't know much about the issue. I offer anybody from the public to bring before this legislature any evidence whatsoever about what it can do to the medical impact of this society. I think it's important to know before we can say
Then we get to one resolution down the road, you're gonna have, that opportunity's gonna be brought forward to the public and everybody else. We'll come out later on, if we get that, we explain what it is, all right?
He could come to the meeting at Maui on Tuesday. I'm sure Dr. Johnson could give it to him.
Okay, back to presentations of petitions. Any petitions to be presented, communications or notices? I would like to take this opportunity just for a minute to express appreciation to the people, and I can only name one name as a person who was ahead of it because there were too many people and I would certainly leave someone else, but I'm talking about Jerry Thomas and the county fair. I don't know how many of you went, but that was a wonderful thing. And there were a lot of people who participated in making it that. We had some of the nicest display booths I've ever seen. The fair was clean, and the attendance, I believe, was better than it was last year, although when it was spread over a period of time in the rainy days, it was sometimes when you looked around, it was hard to tell that. Then someone said to me, did you ever go to the Midway at night up there, and it's crowded, and a lot of the people during the daytime go there, they go around the booths and so on and go to the Midway, so you don't see all of them concentrated in the fair area where the cows and chickens and cooperative extension and 4-H are, but they all see those things. Another thing I'd like to mention is I had the opportunity yesterday, along with legislator Helen Chetney and Len Ponzi, to inspect our new, what do we call this thing? A weed harvester. It's out at the Rice Landing, and we went out yesterday afternoon, had a chance to even get out and ride on it and watch it work. And I'm telling you, that thing really pulls the weeds out. And I think it's a great thing for the county to have, and our money was well invested. And I'd like to thank John D. Hollander and the Public Works Committee and Soil and Water and all those people who were involved and were instrumental in getting us to agree to buy it. Under reports of special committees, I believe the legislator Johnson has something he'd like to say at this point.
The special committee has completed its duties as far as the inquiry into the past and present lawmakers level. It's been sent to each and every legislative board here on the legislature. I want to make a motion that upon completion of all the resolutions today, that we enter into executive session for discussion. I'm sure there's going to be some discussion among this body.
Okay, after the regular resolutions are completed. Pardon?
Motion second. So, I'm going to second, so we do it after the resolution.
Get the resolutions.
All right. Do we need to vote then?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We will now proceed into the resolution.
Before that, I talked to you 3 weeks, a month ago. We had a conversation talking about the possibility of the county-sponsored drug catch law. Pursue that at all?
I'm
So you
sorry.
don't put it in the proper committee.
I don't think I did. I'm sorry.
Every community with a legislative proposal to the county or no matter what. Communities have a problem, but children catch dogs. And, I got some ideas on how it can be operated, and you can assign it to the proper committee. I'd like to take the committee and talk about it. I think it'd be beneficial to everybody to talk about it. Secondly, I would like to bring it to your attention that Mayor Bullard had a wonderful idea for the Miller site to create a trauma center. He's had an awful lot of support from Governor on down. And I think we should support this if this body feels that we should. And I hope it's something that we would help. I'm quite sure that he told me that he had talked to Rupert about it, Rupert was very enthused about it. Nobody should be more aware of the trauma situation than Rupert and Don Bowen. Location, transportation, our airport, everything lends itself very well to the creation of this trauma center. And I think it's something along the lines of industrial development. I brought it up to the Regional Economic Development Council today, and they were very enthused about it. And I think this legislature, maybe has their board done, waiting to maybe got to support it in some way, shape, or form.
Did the commissioner indicate that he was going to discuss it with his committee? Do you want to? Okay. I thought you talked to him about it.
Good idea. Very high-tech job. The closest one is Brook. This is the closest to that.
Legislative rule?
Mr. Chairman, everybody's got 2 letters on their desk from Mr. Lincolnstein. One of them is in regard to his trip to Atlanta, Georgia. I got everybody, they want to read the whole thing over. I asked for a full report on it. He gave me a good report on it. He's president of the NRC now. That don't mean national. That means that he's president of that association, National Recycling Coordination. Now, his wife is here. If anybody has any questions, she can ask. Number 2, he has a letter here stating that he wrote to all the people in regards to the tipping fee. If anybody has any questions on that, contact anybody on the Highway Committee. They'll be able to answer your question. Number 3, there's been a rumor around in Highway Committee that there's been some night dumping in our landfill on Route 3. There definitely has been no dumping on that landfill in the last 5 years at night unless it's been authorized by somebody individually. There's been no dumping whatever. I want to clarify this. If anybody has any proof or any pictures or anybody going in there after dark with a truck or anything on it at all, I'd like to have notified Mark Lincolnstein or Don Moore or the county administrator or whatever. If that's clear, if anybody has any questions in regard to that dumping after that landfill is closed, please contact us. We'll clarify the whole situation. Thank you.
Okay, the first resolution, resolution number 1 is by legislator Beckler.
Chairman, I'd like to offer the following resolution and urge its adoption.
Ask the clerk to read the heading.
Resolution authorizing the execution and delivery of deeds of property sold by the equivalent of the legislature, titles to which were acquired by the tax sales of 1979 through 1989.
Is there any discussion on this resolution? Not all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Resolution is passed. Resolution number 2 is by legislator Brewer.
I offer the following resolution and ask its back.
Ask the clerk to read the heading.
Resolution designating the Oswego County Department of Public Works as a secret agency for the Oswego County Howard Road Line Project.
Is there any discussion on this resolution? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is passed. Resolution number 3 is by legislators Murray and Skinner. Who's going to read it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I offer this resolution urge its adoption.
Well, I'll ask the clerk to read the heading.
Resolution supporting accessible and integrated county programs, activities, and services for Oswego County citizens with disabilities.
Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is passed. Resolution number 4 is by legislator Bryant.
Mr. Chairman, I offer the following resolution and urge for its adoption.
I'll ask the clerk to read the heading.
Resolution authorizing budgetary modification of health department.
Is there any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is passed. Resolution number 5 is by legislator Bryant.
Mr. Chairman, I offer the following resolution and urge its adoption.
Ask the clerk to read the heading.
Resolution authorizing budgetary modification for Agents Road Health Department.
Is there any discussion on this resolution? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is passed. Next resolution is by legislator Bryant.
Mr. Chairman, I offer the following resolution and urge its adoption.
I'll ask the clerk to read the heading.
Resolution authorizing budgetary modification, immunization action plan, health department.
Is there any discussion on this resolution? Not all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is passed. Resolution number 7 is by legislator Reed. Ask the clerk to read the heading.
Resolution authorizing budgetary modification, emergency management office.
Is there any discussion on this resolution? Not all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is passed. Resolution number 8 is by legislator Point.
Mr. Chairman, I offer the following resolution and ask its back.
I'll ask the clerk to read the heading.
Resolution authorizing budgetary modification for an election.
Any discussion on this legislation? Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment on this. I'm on this committee, and I didn't get a chance to sign this. When I got it in the mail, I see it's all signed. And I guess it was signed in the Republican caucus. I am here.
Say something.
I'll speak to that. Legislator Weinhold, I apologize. If you recall at the committee meeting, we didn't have the numbers. I'll have the original resolution for you to sign, so it will be on the record.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor of this resolution? Opposed? Resolution is passed. Resolution number 9 by legislator Skinner. Ask the clerk to read the heading.
Resolution authorizing budgetary modification, buildings and grounds department.
Is there any discussion on this resolution? Go ahead. Legislator Hanson?
The original project was set at $1.1 million. How much we borrowed, I have to speak to Doug. I don't recall what the project was. The original contract was $1.1 million. We had spent $140,000 to date. The cost of bonding the architectural and engineering for the so we have a balance of roughly whatever $1.1 million. project, if we have no change orders on this project, this project is a renovation project. We're really gutting the interior of the courthouse. As we explained to the Buildings and Grounds Committee, to start a renovation project without some sort of contingency, I think is not wise. We are sure to run into some sort of problem when we start tearing the place apart, and discussions with the architect committee, we feel at least $100,000 would be sufficient. If we don't use it, we'll give it back. But we need to have some sort of contingency before we start looking at that building. Otherwise, that's your expense to bring the air and so forth. We got a little bit more. I think it's roughly $10,000 or $15,000 more, but not enough to cover up the contingency. 10%.
Legislator Walker, when is this project going to start?
Well, you guys said yes, the contract will be signed tomorrow, and I believe we're talking about it soon.
Are we having local people doing the work?
Yeah, this particular project, we have been successful in getting what they call project labor agreements initiated where all 4 contractors will be using all local help, all hired out of the hall. It's all union help, all, I think it's, Rose and Barber is the low GC, Culleton Plumbing is the low plumber, J&A is the low HVAC, and Spider Electric is the electric. So they're all local contractors. Yes.
How much we got in there now?
I don't know which we spent on the roof.
Legislative bench.
I think you made the point in Ways and Means the other day, partial answer to Carl, about the reason why you need the $100,000 in terms of the possible delays that can take place if you don't have money available. You want to explain that? Because I don't think the rest of the legislators heard that.
Well, if I remember correctly, part of the problem is that if we get into a proper process is that a change order must be initiated. The change order has to be approved by the architect, the contractor, and the owner being the county. If we do not have sufficient funds in contingency, well, I won't, as representing the owner signing the contract, I'll have to come back to you to get additional funds, which may result in additional delays, which may result in additional money. In other words, why we have a contingency for these things. And so if it comes up, you sit down with the architect, go through it, is this a legitimate expense? Yes, it is, then we'll go expense. Now, we do have to go the other way, occasionally too, we'll catch a break and get it right. But I think if what you're talking about, Herb, is I don't want to be, I don't think it's good for the county. If you're going to do this project, let's do it. I don't want to have to come back to the board, stop the project, say, okay, let's have an argument about whether we want to do this $5,000 change.
It should be noted the first request of $140,000.
Yeah.
Ways and Means decided to go with $100,000. If there is further request, then they will be brought back.
We don't bring the project in without any contingency.
Part question, Jackson, that's the first part about what I'm saying. The second part is there a committee or a person or whoever makes the determination on that committee or?
Buildings, I generally have been doing that. Buildings and Grounds oversees the project, and if that committee wishes to get into the change order business, we do that as well. Generally, I do it. So.
Usually, because you're talking $5,000 or $6,000 for the delay rate, you want to do it. So you do a $50,000 or $40,000 change, then you go to the committee and see if you're going to do that. It's usually a question of time.
Legislator Walker,
Do we have,
I'd just like to know if you're an architect, you inspector, is he on the job? Yes. He has representatives on the job. Yeah.
and do we have a clerk that works on that?
We generally use the architect's representatives. I haven't had a chance, Jerry Thomas, as you know, has done a lot of court work for us, and I'll ask him to watch this project as well. But generally, we use the architect's representatives.
I'd like to see it, clerk of the works, it's not full-time, partially oversee the job. I think that needs to be noted. That should be looked into.
Any other discussion on this? Okay. Legislator
change orders you can get at one of, I have copies, there's copies, in Doug's office. Doug usually retains copies, and I believe the change order copy, yeah, and we've got copies all over the place. You can start with me and
Would that include any capital projects that we've done in the past that might have went over, and it would show why they went over and how much they went over?
change orders go both ways. What you're saying, we have never been in a situation, my memory, where we've gone over the capital project dollar allotment. We've had situations where we've gone over a contract allotment within the capital project because of the sort
Where would we find that information?
again, tell me which project it is, and I'm glad to go pick them up. They're all
Legislator Brown.
I think to clarify that just a little further, Jack, didn't you come to Buildings and Grounds and say that you would not be able to sign a change order unless there was money in the contingency fund transfer? So there would be no change order signed by you unless there was money there for it.
Oh, absolutely. I will not sign a contract unless there's money for it.
Legislator Condon.
My 42 years experience in construction field, this is not unusual. $100,000, $140,000. Actually, it could be. When you take this building apart up here, which is all wood, you're going to run into a lot of problems up there. For unforeseen stuff. This is not unusual. Jack would like to come to the committee to get the money back. But now, I say let them go ahead and do it, see what we got. If we don't use the money, yes, it's right. It's for the fact. We don't have enough money, we'll have to get a little more, that's all.
Any further discussion?
Jack, did you say we made an agreement with the union to hire local law? We can't tell them to hire local law, right?
We're signing project labor agreements with each of the contractors whereby they agree to use local help. Whereby they agree to hire their help through the local hall. Now, I would assume the local halls will use all local help.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Resolution is passed. Legislator Van Tassel.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I'd like to waive the rules for the addition of 3 additional resolutions.
Three. Resolution number 10 is by Legislator Brewer and Murray. This is a resolution of reaffirming the commitment of local law number 3 of 1990.
Your Honor, Mr. Murray. I'm next.
All right, they don't want to do it, I'll introduce it, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, we offer the following resolution that urges adoption.
Read the heading, please.
Resolution requesting that the Oswego County Public. Does everyone?
No, this is,
Resolution reaffirms the commitment of local law number 3 of 1990.
any discussion on this? Legislator Brown.
Yeah, something,